Okay, so it looks like we're recording. So thanks everyone for being here again. We're here with Julie, Pitkin Mason, Paonia, and Valley Organic Growers Association and the Learning Council. And we're here to learn about basic beekeeping for beginners. And we're so excited because we love the bees. We love seeing the flowers blooming now and the honeybees out. So thanks so much, Julie, for having us here today. And I'll just remind everyone right now is on mute. And when people enter, they'll be muted. If you have questions along the way, you're welcome to post them in the chat box. Here, there is a chat box. And I'm also gonna put our websites in there if you'd like to donate to our nonprofit. There's easy ways to donate on our websites. So I'll put that in the chat. And again, if you have questions, you can do that, and we'll check in with the crowd every little while to see if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question. Okay, well, thanks so much. And here's Julie, if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we could get started.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to check to see, can everyone hear Julie okay? Just type it in the chat or unmute yourself and let me know as she's talking if you can hear her. Okay.
Okay. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for thinking about keeping bees. I know that there's so much desire right now to support pollinators of all different kinds, not just our honeybees, but anything we can do to support the natural environment and access to clean and healthy pollen and nectar. This is so important because I think we all can understand that what part of what the bees are suffering with is just not access to healthy food in the form of pollen. I think is really one of the things that is so difficult to understand, the collapse of the honeybee population. But I think a lot of it has to do with the pollen that gets fed really early on. I think about it like maybe feeding a baby plutonium and then expecting it to be a normal 12-year-old. Like there's just, it has a lot of effects, and I think it's one of the things that we can do to just support that cycle. It's just to plant. So anyway, I started keeping bees longer than I would care to admit. And I just remember the first box of bees I ever saw. I was walking in a neighborhood and I saw this box of bees, and I just understood right then that that was what I had to go and do. And so through many twists and turns, that's what I've been doing. I've done a lot of education. I've done a lot of farmers markets. I've done a lot of advocating for sources for pollen and nectar for the bees. And I guess over all these decades, I've sort of been really successful. I've been really, I've failed a lot. I've learned a lot. I've, experienced sort of every realm of emotion I think you can on this path with bees. And so today I got a bunch of stuff out of the bee room, and I thought we could just go through and talk about what's really going to happen when you first get your bees. What is it like? Kind of the state of mind and peace of heart that you want to find yourself in when you come to your bees, and to really understand when is it time to call somebody for help or support when you don't know what you're doing, and the things that you can do to sort of surprise yourself, that you might find your own way to go, oh, that makes sense. The bees are fabulous communicators. And I think when we train our minds to figure out how to hear what they're saying, your experience with your bees will be a lot richer. You'll carry more of them. And I think the other hard part right now is sort of when people have a lot of fear about pollinators, and sort of not to take that fear and deflect it to the bees, but somehow you have to sort of transmute that so that you don't bestow that on your hive. And I think this is becoming increasingly more difficult. So I think we just have to keep remembering the light that the bees are bringing to the planet and sort of stay in that realm. And I think planting flowers is a really easy way to sort of stay in that idea and support local nurseries that are not using neonicotinoid pesticides and supporting organic agriculture. And I think here in the North Fork Valley, we have an amazing opportunity to have a lot of those systems in place. So I thought maybe we could just maybe walk around for a minute. And we talked about maybe when I look in the bee room and see sort of this little area. I've had bees in a lot of different places, and this is sort of my pipe dream. So I got it now. So it's good. So maybe we could just sort of orient ourselves in that way. And then I just really want to encourage people to ask questions in whatever form you want to. Because for me, I think, and for all of us, what we really want to do is answer the questions that are going to help you to understand what, to be just more comfortable and more successful in your first few months, right? While as you sort of figure out what you're doing with the hives. So we'll take a buzz around, and then we'll talk a little bit about what to look for and what does it mean in the hive. And we'll pull out some wax and we'll pass it around. We'll eat honey for all those people on the Zoom. So we're going to eat honey for you. So yeah, then we should walk.
Yeah, I'll just follow around, and like Julie said, if anybody has questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions or post them in the chat. Yeah, we're in Julie's beautiful barn with the stained glass. Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, like Emily said, it's a cold and cloudy day, so we have it blocked off so that the bees can't come and go now. And that's kind of a nice thing. But this is a great place. I like having you here because I don't have room. And I feel like I can. It's easier for the temperature fluctuation to keep them a little bit more stable. I'm a fan of the top bar hive. That's really been my method. I have this box because somebody gave it to me, and I was kind of interested in learning about this other line of genetics that came out of Southern Colorado. Anyway, from Tina. So I got a nuke. So I got this box, and it's a fine box, but I really like the top bar hive better for my own use.
And so during the day, you open this window?
Yeah, when it's warm. Yeah, and then they just come and go. And so in the other room, I pulled out some wax. So here, I just got out a bunch of stuff. I'm assuming that some people are getting a package of bees, right? So it'll come in something like this. There'll be a can in here that has some sugar or corn syrup water in it. You probably want to just take that away from them and make them some tea with sugar and water. And you might as well give them some chamomile or some thyme in that. I like that old saying that says bread and water is so easily toast and tea. So anything that you can do, right? They have this, relationship with plants that far exceeds, I think, anything that we can understand. So if you're going to feed your bees, when you have to feed your bees in the spring, whether first new, just make them tea, chamomile, spearmint, anything like that. I think is good. especially when they first arrive, they might have a stomachache. And then the queen will be in a box like this. And then there's like a, well, this one doesn't have a screen on it, but and then there'll be some kind of a some kind of piece of candy, and you have to remove that maybe with a nail or a thumbtack. Don't stab the queen, but you really want to be able to like brush the other bees off. All the bees will be around it, and you want to brush them off, and then just look at the queen and see what she looks like. Make sure she's healthy. If you have an opportunity, never order a queen that's been clipped or painted. It's not the worst thing in the world, but a queen that's been clipped can't swarm. And I know some people think that's a good idea, but I think really for the bees, that's an important part of their propagation. That's how they replenish themselves. And if we continue to take that instinct away from them by managing them in such a way that that instinct is not expressed, then how long is it before they kind of lose that? And I think we need all the vitality we can get because we're asking a lot of them. So your bees will come and they'll be, full of bees like this, and there'll be something. Yeah, try not to worry too much. Just to keep focused on all the bees that are around. When you pull that can out, bees are going to fly because that's what bees do, and it's not a sign of aggression. So I think one of the main things is just to be calm as much as you can for yourself. And that's why, like, if you need help, then you get a friend to come and you have moral support. And then as gently as you can, you take the queen and you put her in whatever kind of box you're getting. And you can just put it down in there and then thumbtack it to the top. And I would just leave her in if I were a brand new beekeeper. And then as gently as you can take the bees and you can just start to roll them out. And they'll find their queen down in there. And they'll want to go to her. They'll want to do that. So if you can have any wax or any honey in there, that's really the best. Here's some honey in the window, right? It's like a stained glass window. That's one of my favorite parts. I like that. Yeah, and the bees, they want to be kept warm. And here, sometimes we have warm days and then we have cold nights. So I guess it's like any kind of new thing. It's a baby chick, a baby, right? We want to have this kind of consistency of temperature. So you might want to, put a blanket on it or keep it in the garage. If it's really cold when you first get your bees, sometimes it's snowing when that happens. And then, and this is a smaller top hive than I normally use. I really like this size because it's easy to move around. If you want any kind of pollination, it's easy to move around, right? So this is what it looks like when a mouse gets into your. Oh, and yeah. The thing about the top hive that I really like, again, is like that. I really love comb honey. It's like when you can just find different parts of the garden and different parts of the season in the comb, where once you take it out of the comb and smash it all up and put it in a jar, well, it is lovely, no doubt about it. But you can't find, the raspberry bloom in it anymore, or you can't find, like, maybe it's not so good. Like, this is a different kind of honey than this, right? This is a different nectar source.
The dark part.
Right, right. Or maybe this was used to make, brood at one point, but the wax tells a story of what was happening in the hive and what was happening, in the garden during that time. And I don't know.
No, that's really cool.
That's my favorite part. I like that part. So again, if you were introducing your package, or if you're lucky enough to catch a swarm, fingers crossed, You can just put the box down inside and, take your queen out, and you can rock the thing back and forth and try to get all the bees out that you can. And like after a while, there'll be the last few bees in there, and you just keep trying to get them out. And sometimes you can just set it in front of the colony and they'll make their way in. But sometimes they get stuck in the corner, and it just depends on the time of day. If it's getting cold, they're going to need your help to get inside the warm box. And, one of the things with the top bar hive that I think is more difficult, I don't know if it's more difficult, but anyway, it's different when you're just starting out. Just a lot of folks are concerned with top bar hive because they're afraid the combs will get crossed. Once you do straight combs, you can put an empty comb in the middle and they'll draw you out a straight comb, right? This is important. And then if you can see the difference between the worker's comb and the drone comb, which you'll be able to see. Let me bring the glasses. The drone comb is much bigger. And, so this is all like worker comb. And you'll see as you get later in the season, you'll find some drone comb in there. How that was trying to avoid is this. And this isn't even, this isn't bad, right? But then you can't separate those two bars. And this isn't a problem so much because this is honey, right? And I can take this out of the way, but if this happens in your brood chamber and then there becomes something that as a beekeeper or beehaver or guardian, whatever term you care to use, you can't always make a response to it if this happens in your whole hive, because then you can't get in there anymore, right? I mean, then she's kind of on her own, and you may or may not be able to help her if she needs you. It's pretty. It's better if that happens in the honey than that happens in the brood chamber. Yeah, there's all kinds of ways to get your bees from, nukes to packages from California, queens from Hawaii. We're shipping them around the planet. I think the main thing in the beginning of the season is just to keep them warm and fed. I mean, once the dandelions are going, that's good. But you still have to heft the box. I'm not a big advocate of harassing them too much. Like every time you open the box, you don't have to find the queen. If you find an egg, she's been there in the last 3 days. So that's good enough. Don't track her down. And then when you see her, it really is an amazing gift. But yeah, trust me, we'll harass them enough. The other thing I really appreciate about bees is just being able to watch them when they're on the front porch. As a new beekeeper, when you're so curious about your bees and you want to know what's going on in there, I think it's really worthwhile to have a cup of tea or a beer or a glass of wine and just sit in front of them. And I think this also gives the bees a chance to get to know that sometimes you're there and they don't have to get defensive. No problem. And then you can see the pollen coming in. You can see if there's any robbing going on, right? And from that, you can extrapolate all kinds of things about what's going on inside the brood chamber, because that's the most important thing about trying to keep the bees alive. It's just understanding what is the right thing that your queen should be doing at any given time of the season. And that comes with experience, but I also think there's so much information and so many great books. And maybe before the end of class, we could just take a picture of the books over there. Those are just some of the books I really like, that I have found helpful. I have a whole bunch of other books in there, but these are the ones I always like show. Because I think the more comfortable you can become with these little beings, then the easier it is for you to figure out how you step in on or some kind of a benefit for them. Okay? Fingers crossed. Yeah, so I just wonder if there's any questions or anything.
So somebody had a question, what is the source of the Colorado bees? You mentioned something about the Colorado strain.
Oh, well, Tina Sebastian down in, well, I think she's somewhere around Durango. She's south of Durango, but I don't know exactly where she is. I can't tell you the name of her company, but if you look up Tina Sebastian, I think she was the president of the Colorado State Beekeeping Association.
So do you get your bees? Oh, let's see. They said, sorry, I couldn't hear. Tina Sebastian is the name of the woman in Durango.
Yeah, south of
Tina,
Durango, yeah.
Tina
And then,
Sebastian.
there is Melanie down in New Mexico, and I think it's called Longevity Bees. But they have a really interesting program where, yeah, I think what they're doing is the most sort of natural that supports the instinct of the bees to be able to like raise their own queen, because there's an amazing relationship that happens between, you know, a queen is not just an egg laying machine. She sort of like carries this whole essence of the hive. And while many bees will accept queens from a lot of different places, I think there's something sort of interesting, magical that happens when they've raised this queen. You know, they've gone with her on the mating flight. You know, they've all come back. They've all been through this process together. And I think we have to do everything we can do to keep bees connected with whatever instinct they're expressing, because I think this is what they're going to need to survive us.
So somebody asked, do you get a lot of swarms? We're here in Western Colorado, in Paonia. So she's on Pitkin Mesa in Paonia. And so do you get a lot of swarms?
I have not been here on Pitkin Mesa very long, but I can tell you I have swarm boxes out and I didn't see any last year. And last year, before the bees came for the pollination for the orchards, there was no bees here. Like none. So I am really hopeful that there is someone who is more successful than I am right now, and that the swarms will sort of be returning. But bees are being managed more closely than they think they have ever been before, because we're losing so many. So every year is a little bit different. Some years you think, oh, we're not going to get a lot of swarms, and then you get more swarms than you think. Some years it's the opposite.
Any other questions right now? Let's see, doesn't look like it. And the noise is okay. I saw one comment that there's some random noises. There's some turkeys here maybe making some random noises. So now somebody asked, do you bait the swarm boxes?
I've done everything. I mean, I've used the little bait that you get, you know, from the beekeeping store. I've used lemon oil. I've used lemon balm. They're all worth a try. I mean, I think the one I use the most is the lemon balm because it's just always sort of at hand. It's always available. And I think the other good thing is to have some comb that doesn't have any honey in it. And anything you can do to make the box smell like wax, that's the best.
Okay, she said thank you. Do we want to sit?
Okay.
Because apparently the random noise might be me touching the computer. That was a suggestion. So maybe if I don't touch it, then we can chat at the chair.
Nice.
Okay.
So yeah. We're all
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so Julie, do you want to share some of the books you have there and talk about some of these nice books?
Well, I think the thing that's interesting to me is to get sort of as many different points of view as possible. And that doesn't, I mean, that could be about any, but I think it's one of the things that that I think becomes a little bit dangerous is just to become dedicated to your own opinion, if you will. Like when I first went to keep bees, I asked the farmer I was working for if I could do that. And he said, yeah, but you really have to understand that the only people more stubborn than farmers are beekeepers. So that if you, right, if you ask a room full of 99 beekeepers an opinion, you'll get 100 opinions. Like it can be a kind of thing we get opinionated about. And I think with the bees at this state, having less blinders, in my perception, I feel like an opinion is something that you can become, that can make blinders, right? That you can become dedicated to. And from that, maybe then you think you know what's happening inside the hive. And so you don't really investigate maybe as thoroughly as you might have if you didn't have an opinion that you were supporting. Or so I think this is why I like to have a wide variety of sources. But my favorite one is just the bee herself. And I love this book because this is a book that has photographs of bees, and they're like all under an you know, probably can't see that very well, but from like a like this is her eyeball.
Wow.
Right?
Can you see that?
She's completely covered with buds. Every possible thing, right? And then you just realize that this creature is meant to transport pollen, right? Like everything about her is to move pollen. I can't even see what is.
Yeah, that you can see. Yeah, that looks good.
Right.
Mhm.
And so it's and there's there's not a lot of text, but
the name of the book is called Bee, B-E-E by Rosalind Fisher.
Thank you. Right. Right. And then you can read a lot about drones' eyes and how important this is, right? I mean, this is the feature that finds a queen on a mating flight in the middle of the great big blue sky, right? I mean, like, so for me, it's interesting to really, I don't know, to look at things closely like this. So this is probably my favorite book, but there's nothing in it about beekeeping.
It's just the beauty of the bees.
Yeah, and you realize everything she's doing here is to move pollen around the planet. She's feeding everybody pollen. So this is a really old book. It's a total bee nerd book.
This is called Honey Plants of North America by John H. Lovell, 1926.
Right.
Honey Plants of North America.
And that is a total nerd book. But you can learn so much about different plants and different kinds of nectar and pollen and where they're coming from and what's the value of those different nectars and pollen. Like the pollen that comes from a dandelion is like this treasure trove, but the pollen that comes from your peach tree is not, right? So having this wide variety of pollen and then this understanding of like what's the good stuff and what's not. I always like Gunther Hawk. He
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what a dear man. Right?
So he's a biodynamic guy. I saw him at a conference. Gunther Hawk Toward Saving the Honeybee is the name of that book.
Yeah.
By Gunther, Guntherhauk.
And he's just got a lot of really lovely perspectives. And he's been at it a long time. And, right, so then there's Steiner.
Somebody commented his sanctuary in Floyd, Virginia is great.
I bet it is.
Spikenard Sanctuary.
Right,
Mhm.
right. I haven't been.
That's
Spikenard, it's called.
Right.
Mhm.
Another book,
Another book, Bees by Rudolf Steiner.
right?
Bees by Rudolf Steiner, with an afterword. There we go. So that looks like a good one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the Tupper Hive, Les Crowder, who's a beekeeper down in New Mexico, wrote this sweet little handbook about Tupper Hive beekeeping. And I was keeping bees in Tupper Hives probably 20 years before that book came out. But I tell you, I learned a lot by reading that book, even after, I thought I knew so much. Which is, always a good thing to realize you don't know nearly as much as you do. I like this book. It can get like technical kind of stuff. I like that because it's a real hard science, but it never loses sort of focus of what I think he's calling a superorganism, right? To really understand that this colony of bees is affecting not only, these 12 frames of wax and honey, but it's making this direct impact on like everything you can see by their work in the field. And anyway, it's got great information about dance and like what the bees see, but this is fun. This is a good nerd book, The Buzz About Bees. And then I put these other books in the pile because, I think sometimes maybe keeping honeybees is not attainable for whatever reason, right? You're busy, your kids are little, there's too many goats, whatever. But you can always like support other pollinators, right? Other native bees, like with these simple blocks of wood with different holes drilled in them. And then just again, providing food sources, right? We can't have healthy pollinators unless we have healthy sources and sort of as year round as we can get. So if we can get like 3 seasons blooming in your yard, that's awesome, or on your patio. Then I got the Mycelium Learning book, right, Paul Stamens, because he's doing some really interesting research with mycelium and the honeybee's immune system. And I've just had some experiences where, having different forms of mycelium in the garden and putting water there, and then the bees like go to that mycelium water. They're really attracted to it. So I think, again, anything we can do to sort of fundamentally support them, it's the best.
So I have a question for you about attracting native pollinators. The first question would be, what types of pollinators besides honeybees are we looking to attract? And then the second part of the question would be, what are your favorite bee foods and things to plant, like for bees?
Right. Well, I think Colorado has one of the highest numbers of native bees. And I think it's partly, we have all these different elevations and all these different microclimates, but we have the really rich forms of number of different bees. I mean, some of these bees are making these little tiny holes. And then, some of them are even bigger than this, like the bumblebees. So bees tend to like flowers. That they
hold that closer to.
Sure, yeah. Oh yeah, and that's for the lady at the
see a little bit
farmer's
down.
market.
See, you can see there's different. You can kind of see there's different size holes in there. So that's cool. That's for the native bees. Okay.
Yeah. They don't sting, and they're never coming out in great numbers, but they come out at very specific times, and they pollinate more efficiently and effectively than honeybees do, because they'll fly at lower temperatures. And the other part of it, what was my favorite food? I love dandelions.
Oh yeah, the dandelions are nice.
Love dandelions because they come at a really a powerful time in the season. Like if you've gotten your bees to the dandelion bloom, like you've maybe made it. You know, like it's a really good indicator that they've made it through the winter if you can get that far. So I tend to love things on either end of the growing season, right? And really early on to sort of inspire the bees to go out of the hive, sort of crocuses. I love crocuses. Right? Any kind of thing that's blooming early. And then, I really think there is a lot to be explored in the relationship between medicinal plants and providing enough medicinal plants. Thyme is a great one. Savory, summer savory is a lovely one for bees, because it supports the bees in all of those medicinal ways. Right? It supports your, the lymph, or the, what do we call it? I'm going to totally lose my vocabulary, but yeah, it's a relationship that's as old as time, so I think providing as much medicine in the purest form is the best thing that we can do. And having native plants, well, that's even better. I love goldenrod. Again, for that same kind of reason, like as the summer is coming to an end, the goldenrod pollen is powerful, and they can store up a bunch of that because that pollen has to last all the way through the winter, keep the bees sort of going all the way through, and then be enough to sort of start the brood production again as she starts to lay eggs more and more, and as that population continues to grow, hopefully bigger and bigger. Yeah.
So we have a question. How do you make mycelium water?
Oh, well, I just got a bunch of these plugs actually from, what is the name of this company?
My community. No, what is it?
Right.
Yeah, from Paul Stamos's company.
Anyway, I got plugs, right, that you drill a hole and you put it into different kinds of logs. Some mycelium wants to grow in aspen, some wants to grow in maple. So
Fungi perfecta.
Yeah, fungi perfecta.
So I did that with medicinal mushrooms, logs, and then I would just have the wood chips and have just a shallow dish of water, and then just keep it really moist, and then that's where the bees. That's sort of like at the same time I realized he was doing this, I was just seeing this in my own bee yard, right, where wood was rotting, and remember they're tree dwellers, right? They live in trees. So there's, again, this relationship where they're already plugged in because they've been unchanged for like however many billion years. Like they're the same. They haven't changed much. They really haven't figured out. And if we can sort of protect the planet enough that they can survive and not get poisoned, then they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a comment here. I love a book called Song of Increase by Jacqueline Freeman.
Yeah.
In Washington State.
Yeah, that's a great book. I had it in my hand just the other day, but I left it somewhere else.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Cool. Great.
Nice. Thank you.
Cool. And then I see a lot of bee hotels that are very large. Is there an issue with pathogens being transferred between normally solitary native bees?
Not that I know of. And I think that, because each one of those tubes are occupied for a short period of time. I don't know. I think they freeze. I don't know. But I do know that, like, I had some old standing dead, and I drilled different size holes just in the tree stumps. And the bees are coming and going there for a long time now. And there doesn't seem to be any, more and more bees come every year. So Yeah, standing dead. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great. Someone said that's great. Thank you. And so what do you think are some of the biggest problems facing the bees and why they're struggling to survive the winters recently?
Again, I think there's a million answers to that question. And but I do believe that the neonicotinoids, having genetically modified pollen available, sort of when I started keeping bees, when your bees got poisoned by the spray plane, then you could just see your bees in front of the colony, just twitching and dying, and piles of dead bees. And so you had something that you could prove, right? There's the spray plane, and here's my pile of dead bees, right? And so somebody could come and investigate and try to enforce the label and the law. And now the bees are not dying like that. Now the bees are dwindling. There's sort of no, quote, evidence of a kill. And this leads me to believe that it really is the pollen that gets collected and stored. And, some of these chemicals are so poisonous, I think we don't really understand, or not taking responsibility for how detrimental they are, and how long-lived they are in soil and water, and how those are expressed in pollen. So like I said earlier, like it's sort of like feeding your 3-month-old baby, I don't know, arsenic or something the whole time it's growing up, and then expecting it to live, to be a healthy 60-year-old person. I don't know, maybe that's, not the right example, but the colony of bees is, it's a balancing act, and you have to, and as bees grow, they have specific jobs based on how old they are, right? First they, they hatch, they grow into themselves, right? They morph into, and they emerge as a bee, and then they clean their room, right? And then they help to take care of the other bees, then they're nurse bees, and they do that, right? When they're young and they have, glands in their heads where they can make royal jelly. Their wax glands are young and functioning. So then they go and they become wax builders. So then they build their home, right? And they build more bedrooms for their sisters who are coming. And they build more containers for the honey and the pollen. And then they become like guard bees, right? They're the ones on the front porch who are really looking to sting you when you've made them angry. And then they become field bees, right? So these are the bees we're more familiar with, because those are the bees that you see. And anyway, so when any of those jobs gets disrupted by a patch of poison pollen, right? Then you don't have the nurse bees well enough to care for the young, right? Or you have the nurse bees feeding the young something that, over the long, term of a bee's life is going to affect its ability to create wax or navigate or any of the other, things that are sort of out there for what's happening to the bees. So I think that disruption of these systems, right? These age groups, right? Like a healthy community, you can't just have field bees, you have to have the young bees, creating the nurse bees, and then you have to have winter bees who have more fat bodies, who can live a longer time. But if those bees were fed in such a way that those fat bodies couldn't develop in their body, they can't survive a winter because they don't have the resources to heat the hive. So there's a million things that, and I think, the bees are really on the front line of agricultural poisoning, right? These guys, God bless them, they're like strapped on the truck and they're like moved from place to place, because this is the agricultural system we've created, right? This is not a beekeeper's fault. This is not the bees' fault. This is a system that we have to really look at and say, we could do better. We could just fly together. We have the capacity to do that. And, you know, someday we may.
Artificial insemination of the queen.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah,
So it's not like a localized
right,
breed.
right, right. So you don't have these regional strengths of these queens that are from a region who understands that, you know, there's a spring, there's a fall spring, you know, there's, you know, that the fall can go
Fall.
on and on and on, you know, and this leaves an opportunity for the mites to grow and grow and grow. So, gosh, I don't know, pick a poison, right? Yeah, a disconnection from instinct. You know, like you said, the artificial insemination of the queen. I don't know. Maybe it's not our best idea just because we can do it. Maybe it's our better idea to like support, you know, drone congregation areas. Now that's a cool fact, right? I mean, like this like a bar with all these like drones
Yeah.
hanging out, you know, where there's water nearby, either on the surface or under the soil. And it's a place where mating takes place, right? I don't know, there's something magical about that. You know? And they are these amazing creatures, right? I mean, like they're harvesting the sun, right? It's the candle in the candle earlier, right? And not everybody can harvest the sun. So I think, you know, I think for like new beekeepers right now, I'm just so, I'm so proud of your courage to sort of take this on and think about taking this on. Because I think we all understand that it can become more and more difficult. Yeah. But, you know, I am still hopeful.
Do you think like you have your hive inside? You think that is a better chance? Being a little bit warmer, surviving.
Well, that was my hope, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's my hope to take these, like, you know, here it's not so bad. These temperature differentials, it's like, right, it's 75 degrees, it's 20 degrees, right? And just sort of flatten that out a little bit. And then the thing I really hate is wind. Man, if you can position your hive in a place where it's protected from the wind, I think that's so important. Because the wind, and it's also probably, I just hate the wind myself. I don't like to work in it. I know I've done that long enough. So I think just finding a way that, yeah, this is, you know, putting them inside the barn. It was, you know, it's a way that I've just been trying to find certain circumstances that would help them in whatever way, right? And if it works, that's awesome. Doesn't work, well, you know, maybe we just keep trying something else. But I think, you know, inside or not, the key is about protection, you know, and that can be, you know, from the bear, from the skunk, the raccoon, any kind of thing like that. So it was also just my selfish desire not to worry about the electric bear fence anymore. You know, to like wake up in the night and go, okay, the bear's in the neighborhood, like, God, is the fence on? You know. So now I don't worry. So I appreciate it.
Upstairs in the barn.
Right,
Safe and
right.
Yeah.
If there's a bear in there, I'm not gonna do anything about it.
Yeah.
Okay. I just also wanted to talk a little bit about the smoker and maybe about treating some of the things that we can have treatment for. And I don't know, I don't have, we have about 30 minutes left, is that accurate?
Yeah.
5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
we
mean,
said till
just
about
to-
5:30. Yeah.
Yada, yada, how long we have to do that. So again, I can't, I mean, I guess I came to bees from the garden. So one of my interests is their relationship with plants. And so I think that's also true in whatever you're burning in your smoker. And I think there's some plants I really recommend having around. And one of them is like these sumac berries. So these little guys, they grow kind of everywhere, right? It's a common plant, sumac. And when you burn this in the smoker, it makes the mites fall off the bee.
The mites fall off the bee. Wow.
It does
With the
not
smell.
kill the mite,
Mhm.
but if you have a screen bottom board, then you can, then the mite falls down in there, and then you put something in there that the mite sticks to. It doesn't kill the mites already in the cell. So you have to kind of continually burn it. And definitely have to burn it, for 3 weeks, which is the life cycle of the varroa mite. And you have to just fill it up, fill up the box, and let it just smoke them out.
So that's the sumac.
That's the sumac. The other thing I like to grow is I like to burn any kind of herb that is soothing, right? So mint, lavender. I really like spearmint. Anything like that, you might as well burn that in your smoker because it makes beautiful smoke. The sumac smoke, it's medicine. It's thick and it's dark and it's gray, and that's when you know you're through the other plants. And when it starts sort of burning, it's kind of caustic, but it makes the mite fall off the bee. So I found, like, I'm not a big fan of the smoke, right? Because it makes an alarm system for the bees. But as medicine, I don't discount it as a tool, right? So that's the smoker. And, plus when I did this with kids, it was always great. You could get somebody who's a pyromaniac to like the smoker, and that you could keep 5 kids busy for like 15 minutes. It was a good thing. The other things that I do, if I'm just going to do like a little bit of something, I have something in the other room. I'm going to run and do it. But I grew some tobacco, right? Tobacco is probably one of the oldest cultivated plants, and for a lot of people, this is a sacred plant. And what the hell, right? Because I've also read that tobacco smoke will help the mites fall off the bee. Got my own relationship with tobacco, so I use that one sparingly.
So what you held up for the sumac, that looks like the flowering part of the plant.
Right, that's the sumac berry.
So
Yeah,
this is berries of the sumac,
right.
and this is the local.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the local sumac. It's also called like soap brush.
Yeah.
And it has a soapy smell. The goats eat it.
Do they?
Yeah, the goats like it, and then their breath
really?
smells like it. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So this is a local plant here in Western Colorado. If you break the leaves, it smells a little soapy. So it's our local sumac here that's around the junipers.
Right. I'll be right back. It's just the berries.
So just the berries is what she's.
I've also heard, that the creosote.
I'm not sure if it's I'm not sure what the difference is between the 3-leaf sumac or the smooth sumac. Do you know somebody that?
Well, the 3-leaf sumac doesn't make very big berry clusters. It makes
Okay.
small berry clusters. I've never burned it because I have a friend who's got like a sumac forest. So I just get the big clusters from her. But I guess you could collect the other ones. I mean, why not?
Yeah,
Right.
whatever. So the berries of the sumac drop the mites from the bees.
So does the creosote bush,
Oh yeah.
which
Uh-huh.
I've never tried. I
Uh-huh.
read that in that top one hive.
Uh-huh.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, it does not get the mite inside the cell, so you have to keep at it, right? You have to really pay attention.
And then you also mentioned the tobacco you like too.
I do,
Mhm.
yeah.
And it doesn't harm the bees to be in
Well,
smoke.
No, I mean, the tobacco is just if I'm gonna go in and I wanna just check one quick thing, and I don't wanna light the smoker. I don't use the smoker much anymore now that I'm in the house, 'cause,
Yeah.
but I used to really love to light the smoker and just leave it burning in the bee yard, right?
Uh-huh.
And just have that in their environment. So the other thing, like if you're just gonna go in and do one quick thing and you don't wanna make a big production out of it, I really love sweetgrass,
Oh, yeah.
right? And I really love to burn sage or some combination thereof, right? I mean, these are all sacred plants and what is happening in that box is sacred. It's feeding the planet. So I don't feel very shy about using sort of plants that are ceremonial, that are burned ceremonially, because like right now, I'm like, I would do anything. I would try anything that didn't seem detrimental. And you know, this little stick, I don't remember what it's
Palo
called.
Santo.
Palo Santo. This is also like a lovely little thing. You're just gonna quickly check them, or you know, you just are there for a minute. Yeah, I think it's an interesting way to communicate with these. And then some of the other things you could do is like oxalic acid, which is right now it's legal. You can get all forms of it from the beekeeping company. I made this jerry rig thing out of a plumbing pipe and a thing that heats your coffee. And this thing will actually like vaporize the oxalic acid. So if the mites get really bad, right, you can put this in the hive and it will kill the mites. And again, not the mites in the cell itself. So you have to keep applying it. You have to keep doing something that locks the mites. It's been a very long time since I used any other miticide, but here in Western Colorado, the fall goes on and on and on, and the mites can really get a strong foothold. So I think the thing is in the summer, just to really, really watch it and stop them as quickly as you can. And if you have to use a big gun, use it.
Oxalic acid, OXALIC.
OAX.
Oh, something, oxalic acid.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
so somebody,
And, you know, beekeeping is not a bravado sport. So if you're more comfortable wearing gloves and a veil until you get to know your bees, or the whole time you know your bees, then you should do that. I will say after you get stung a while, that it just doesn't really affect, like the effect decreases as the time goes on.
so there's a question too about maybe just covering the different types of hives. Have you tried a Ware hive? You said you prefer the top bars. Why do you prefer the top bars over the Langstroth? Just those, I know people, you know, those three options are things that people consider.
Right. I have never had a Ware hive. I've worked in a Ware hive with someone who had one. I prefer the top bar because for me, I love the wax. I'm fascinated with the wax, and when they're given the kind of freedom to draw out the kind of comb they want to draw out, sort of within these parameters that keep it a movable hive or movable frame hive, then I think it's interesting to be able to understand, like, at what part of the summer do they start to draw drone comb to fill with honey? Like like I said, the wax can tell a story that for me is easier to read when they're sort of given that blank piece of paper. Like, you don't have to use a foundation in a Langstroth hive. You can start. It's just like a strip of wax. It doesn't even have to be this big. And then they can draw out, you know, that comb to make it straight. I have to say, I wouldn't use foundation if I had another choice. Because that wax has already been around the block, and you don't really know what's been stored in it. And wax sort of encapsulates things. So a lot of that wax has traveled through the agricultural cycle of things. So probably not the cleanest.
There was also a question here about flow hives. Have you seen
I
those?
saw them on the internet.
Yeah, some on the internet. You know anything about them?
Well, first, I should say, I know nothing about them, but then I could give you my opinion,
Uh-huh.
right?
I heard another beekeeper's opinion about them here specifically, that possibly it was too dry, so they wouldn't flow, like the honey wouldn't move.
Yeah, that's totally possible. But I also think if you are starting a relationship with bees and your focus is the honey,
Mhm.
not so much, not at this time. You know, I feel like that, you know, if you're too lazy to harvest honey, you should go to the store and buy a jar of the stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, and that's just my opinion. I've never worked with one. I've never seen one in action. I just feel like maybe what most people are interested in is cultivating a kind of relationship, right? Like you do in your garden, right? They're another asset to your garden, like your chicken or your turkey or your beets or whatever. But you learn something, right, from this interaction. And when you have bees, you will just really never see your garden or the environment the same again. You know, right? They open your perceptions to being able to take in everything that's happening in the environment. The quality of the light, the quality of, you know, the peacefulness of a place, of what's blooming, how long is it blooming, access to clean water. Like you will just carry with you this idea of like, how are we serving the things that are serving us, right? And you know, when it's cold outside, you know, and the wind is blowing or the temperature has just made some radical thing, you know, you'll just be praying for your bees, right? And if you're not praying for your bees, maybe you could be praying for mine, or you could be praying for yours, right? I mean, they really are creatures that are tapped into a kind of higher form of communication. I mean, that dance, holy cow. I mean, what they do to communicate with one another is just, it's precious. It really is. Yeah. And I think you have to really love that part of standing next to a box of stinging insects, right? Because it's not for everybody. And I don't think everybody should be a beekeeper. I think if you're going to have bees, it really is so important to the community that you take care of them, particularly around the mite, you know, or disease issues. That if you just want to have bees to have in your backyard because it's a cool or it's a fad thing to do, but you're not going to treat for mites, that colony is going to take out 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other neighboring colonies, right? No matter what the other beekeeper does, right? I was talking with an old friend of mine who was one of the first people I called to ask, I want to keep bees and tell me what to do, right? And he just said, like, you can do everything right. You can do everything right and lose them. So if you're not going to do everything right, stay home. Then, you know, go and play with somebody else's bees in their yard and support them in what they're doing, right? Until your life reaches whatever kind of state it needs to reach, that you have the time and energy to focus. But I do think that is a kind of critical piece right now, as more and more people are taking on keeping bees in the backyard, which I think is absolutely the right direction to go. You know, like stepping back so that bees don't have to get shipped around, that we have bees here. You know, that when the orchards start blooming, those bees are coming from California, or maybe only some of them are, right? Whatever we can do to sort of support the agriculture in our own communities. And that means managing the mite population in your home.
Let them swarm.
Right, heck, and if they'll swarm, hallelujah, right, you know? And let the drones live. Don't kill the drones, please. you know, because the mites love drones. They're juicier, they're fatter, they take longer in the cell, you know, yeah, they love that, but we need drones to keep that genetic information alive. So, yeah, any more questions?
Nope, not right now. And I just wanted to clarify, so your best way of dealing with the mites is the sumac smoke.
That's the first thing I try. Absolutely. Then the next thing I try is, one of the things I really like is when it's really hot, it's 100 degrees, and the last thing I think anybody wants is smoke, right? Then I think having a squirt bottle is so useful. And in here, you have to be careful, but you can put like little homeopathic amounts of oxalic acid. You can put oxalic acid on the landing board and spray it down. So then the bees walk through that medicine and they distribute it inside the hive, right? So I think that that keeping and again, I think there's products on the market that I'm just not familiar with. When I started using oxalic acid, it was illegal. So and there's formic acid, and I will say I tried that one time, but I felt like it made an influence on the queens that was just it was harsh.
Interesting.
You know, that was when it first came out. So I just think there's a lot to research and a lot to investigate. And I think, you know, as a community of beekeepers, we can share what's working, what's not working. Because I'm sure there's somebody who knows so much more about what's available on the market than I do. And maybe they've just gotten really good at it.
I think what's important is, you know, having options that aren't chemicals, you know, not just blasting your hive.
Sure. Right.
You know, or relying on buying new bees every year, or, you know, being able to maintain the bees that are here.
Right.
Is really important, I think, for
Right.
people.
Right. And then as beekeepers, we can sort of get together and say, okay, here's a survivor hive, right? How can we share our, you know, queen cells with one another, right? How can we, you know, revolutionize this region, right? And create these that do know how to live here, that do know how to make it through the season. And I think this takes time, you know, and it takes dedication, and it takes, a lot of willpower. Because I think, you know, a lot what happens when we receive bees in the mail, when we have these queens that are mated, they'll live through the first summer. They will, but they won't make the fall, you know. They'll fail in some way, and that's cyclical. Like, we've taken a perennial being and turned it into an annual. Maybe this isn't really the right direction that we want to go, right? So I think that that there are ways, as you know, as beekeepers get to know one another, that we can share brood stock that has survived. We can figure out how we can resource, you know, our survivors and grow queens. There's just a lot of ways that we can make a response to what we're witnessing. And that is sort of also by learning, what are we learning in the hive, right? We're learning about communication, we're learning about harvesting light, we're learning about generosity, right? I mean, these are all the things that happen inside a beehive all day, every day, right? And I mean, it's just what's happening in there. It's, you know, it's, just the facts, just what's happening.
So there's a question, are there some bees that are better at self-hygiene and grooming themselves?
Yeah, there are, right, and they're usually sold as hygienic bees, and that means that they will clean. They'll clean the mites off one another. It's sort of a grooming gig, right? So if somebody gets a mite, then somebody else might be more likely to help them get it. And that's one of the things I think. And if anybody comes across some creosote bush, I would like to try that. But like these the juniper berries, I think one of the reasons that works is it's irritating.
Huh.
It is irritating. Boy, you're around that stuff all day. You're like, I mean, you can feel it.
Oh, the sumac.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. And I think it's irritating and it makes them groom. Right?
Interesting, huh?
Sure.
And then the mite
Mhm.
falls, and then, you know, you get that screen bottom board. The mites are not athletic. So once they're down, and if they're down and stuck to something, you know, that's even just like salve, they can't get back up.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's an opponent that you can see, amen, right? And it's an opponent you can do something about. And it's a formidable opponent. Some of these opponents, some of the things that are happening to bees, we can't even see. We have no idea. I have no idea. My understanding of that chemistry is insufficient. But yeah, I think we have a lot of possibility.
I have a question. What's something that like the community can do? Maybe if not everyone wants to keep bees, what can we do to support your bees? You know, if we're
Yeah.
neighbors, like, you know, plants we can plant, or is there a certain type of water dish we could put out?
Yeah, good question.
Mhm.
I think the water dish is a great thing, especially here where it gets so dry in the late summer. And just a shallow pan that's got rocks or some way for the bees to get the drink without drowning, right? It will also keep the bees out of your neighbor's hot tub, which is always a really good thing because that's kind of hard to explain after a while. So I think water is a huge part of it. Planting anything is good. Planting anything is good. And then, you know, especially if it's from a nursery that is not using neonicotinoids. We have so many good resources here. And even like at Lowe's and Home Depot, they now have a brand that has a little thing on it that says neonicotinoid free,
Wow.
right?
Mhm.
So like that's power, right? And we just vote with our checkbooks, right? You vote with your debit card and you don't buy the cheap plants that are grown in Georgia in some kind of chemical soup, because that chemical soup gets in the soil and it's got a long life, right? And it's designed to be picked up and expressed in the nectar and the pollen of the plant. So this, you know, is important. And then the other big piece is buy organic food. You know, I know it's more expensive, but what is the price of clean water and clean soil and healthy hives and healthy community? So I think anything we can do to sort of stop that cycle of chemicals being dumped on food, right? And then purchase because it's inexpensive, right? I mean, you can buy strawberries that have been shipped for so long and so far, and they've been gassed and poisoned for like 99 cents. I mean, how is anybody making an honest living? How is the person who has been picking those plants and exposed to all that being given any kind of like, I don't know, basic human decency, right? It's not just about the 99 cents versus the $2.99 or whatever the price difference is, right? I mean, there's a whole world in there. And I think that's one of the things that, for me, as you know, for doing this for a while, is that making that point understood that all these things are connected, right? What happens in the colony and that collapse is all connected with how we're eating, how we're feeding each other. And those bees are feeding us, and these beekeepers and these farmers have been feeding us for a long time. And what we want to do is direct them in such a way that they feed and provide in such a way that they are given an honorable living wage, right? They're treated with honor. And so we have that cycle, and we can do that with our little debit card at the grocery store. You know, it might not seem like much, but every acre, everything we can do to keep organic agriculture in production, that's the game. That's the stuff.
I think shape of the hive matters too, because if you read Rudolf Steiner, and we all know the bees are very spiritual creatures, and the height from the ground
Oh, yeah.
really makes a
Yeah.
difference. The
Yeah.
higher, the better.
Yeah.
The shape of the hive
Yeah.
makes a difference. Like the top bar hive is almost a half of a hexagon of what they
Right.
make. Square shapes in sacred geometry are more related to the earth. So it kind of takes a spiritual queen of the sun
Right.
and grounds
Right.
them to earth.
Right.
And there's also the different metals.
Right.
Copper and brass are really good for a hive versus steel, again, kind of drives them
Right.
back into the earth instead of
Right.
keeping them lifted like the sun.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that information could be in Rudolf Steiner's bee
Right.
lectures and
Right.
in other like spiritual books
Right.
of the bee. And that gives them a little extra lift.
Yeah. I have,
Like
yeah, being on the second story of the barn this year is the first time I've ever had bees. It's like this high up. Oh, that was
Wow.
awesome.
That's so
Right?
cool.
Because you're up there like in their natural environment.
Yeah.
That's where, they're forest dwellers.
Mhm.
And so I think, I don't have his book here, but the guy who wrote The Barefoot Beekeeper.
Is it the same person as the barefoot farmer?
No, I
No,
don't think so.
Yeah.
He's an English guy.
Okay.
But he did this thinking about they live in trees and like what is in the bottom of a tree, right? Like in that cavity, there's all this dust and there's all these creatures that are in there decomposing the wood, right? Well, who eats mice, right? Decomposers, right? So like there's all kinds of ways to think about what you can cultivate in your own bee yard, right? I used to just collect leaves from all over the place and pack them around the hives, just imagining that those decomposers are in there. And then all these funny little bugs sort of after a couple of years start to just live in the bee yard too. And you have to imagine, right? Then some of those guys are eating mites.
Wow.
That's cool,
Mhm.
right? Anybody who will eat a mite is a friend of mine.
PJ Chandler.
There you go.
That's
Thank
what
you. I know,
everyone
but this guy's
said.
just like,
I know.
like he's on a celebrity, right?
I know. Yeah.
I saw him talk one time in Denver and it was just, it's just good.
That's cool. So somebody asked, how long would it take for the bees to fill a frame with wax?
Good question. And it's all about what is blooming, right? So if the clover is on, or there's something that's just juicy, they can draw out wax in, if it's a strong colony, they could draw out one of those whole top bar frames in a day and a half. Like if everything is like on the go. You've got the population, they're strong, they're healthy. You've got a nectar source that's sort of nonstop. Some plants only release nectar at certain times of the day. Other plants release nectar like all day long, so that the bees will go and work different things. But if you're like in a major honey flow, like the alfalfa or the clover is going strong, they can pull so much wax. So
Interesting.
Is it because the nectar gives them a lot of energy and drawing a comb is energy intensive?
right. It takes 9 times more energy to draw a comb than it does to make honey.
Wow.
Right. They're secreting this thing from their own body, right? This wax. It's cool when you see, I'm sure there's some lovely images online that have like the platelets of the wax coming out of the bee.
Oh,
right? They make these little tiny platelets and then they form them together perfectly with their mandibles and they like all chain together in this festooning and they build this little mini cathedral in there, everything just so, right? And that takes a lot of energy and warmth. So to be able to make wax, the colony has to be kept warm. I think it needs to be like 80, 90 degrees in there when they're building wax.
Yeah, their temperature is like 98.6 or 7.
wow.
It's like ours.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
ours.
Yeah.
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 Thought that was a neat correlation too.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think, for people who are just starting to keep bees, not that you can really prepare to have your world, completely opened up, but some people who, you know, have experience working with bees, they'll never be the same, right? There's something that's transformative about understanding, right,
Mhm.
what happens in the box.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Are there any last questions? I feel like we're.
I have a question about, you know, somebody mentioned they have to maintain their temperature in the winter. And I know people talk about insulating their hives, maybe gluing some foam board on the outside for the winter or covering the whole hive in hay bales.
Right,
What do you recommend, anything like that? Because I've also heard the insulating could create too much humidity, which would then cause it to be colder
right,
and freeze.
right. Well said. So,
Mhm.
like all of the above. And I do think, well, the thing with the straw is that mice also love the straw bales. So if you choose that option, you have to be really careful because the mice can get in the hive when it's cold and the bees can't really move. Once they're like in this little cluster, they're not very athletic. Like they can look like they're dead. So the mouse can go in there, make a nest in the back, and be totally set up. So that's my only caution about the straw bales. Otherwise, I really like them for like blocking the wind. I really discourage people from wrapping them in any kind of plastic. I know there's some stuff that's available, you know, commercially that it's like black plastic, and this seems to me the whole mold mildew like disaster waiting to happen. The other thing you can do is you can, you know, insulate them when it's cold, cover them when it's cold, and then uncover them when it's warm, right? I used to take just like a kind of weed mat and pack leaves in around it. You know, again, this idea from Chandler about how do we create this ecosystem that supports the bee, you know, in its tree life. And I like that because mice didn't really come. These other decomposing bugs, which I don't even know what to call them, came, and it blocked the wind, right? And then on these warm days when you want the sun to hit the wood, you want them to know it's coming back around. They know that's right. And then it's easy to peel back and let the sun, you know, shine in. And then if it's going to get cold or snow, then you can take that, you know, and put it back around and sort of harvest that warmth for them, right? So it's just like if you had a baby chick or a baby goat, any kind of living thing that you have in the yard, you would make effort to, you know, control their environment, you know, turn the heat lamp off, turn the heat lamp off. I mean, this is what we do.
Cotton or wool blankets?
Good question. Well, it's okay as long as it doesn't get wet, right? But like the worst thing is to think you're doing your bees a favor and putting on like the wool blanket and then coming back the next morning and it's become sodden and wet. And then instead of being warm and dry, your bees have been cold and wet. Okay, this sucks. So we just have to always be thinking about, really, is it gonna rain? Don't put the wool blanket. You know?
Use down.
Down?
Down.
I would say the same thing, right? If it gets wet, let it dry.
Well, yeah, but something
Yeah.
around it, you know, maybe
Sure.
like a little tarp to protect it.
Or a
Sure.
roof? Or,
Right.
Yeah,
Anything.
down.
Yeah. But I think the thing is to be able to manage it a
Yeah.
little bit, you know? Winter isn't one thing.
Right.
Right.
Winter is many things.
You don't put it away for 3 months and
Right.
think it's going to be fine every day.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think also the bees, I mean, this is one of the things that I think is interesting about Gunther is like his point of view. It's like, you know, your bees, I think they start to know who you are, right? And it's important to go out there and let them know you're there, right? Sometimes with a smoker, when I know it's gonna like get cold, I'll go out there for no good reason and smoke the snot out of them because if it's warm in the afternoon, then they'll move around and they'll eat, right? And then they've been fed and then the cold hits, right? So there's just all kinds of ways you can think about how you can support what is going on in the box, right? So you don't want them to be cold and hungry. If you can encourage them to eat, with a couple of puffs of smoke, they don't need much, right? So there's a lot of ways that, and as you keep using your own backyard, you'll find your own like fabulous idea, and it will work, or it won't. And sometimes it will work, and sometimes it won't work. I mean, life is long, and something that works, that you think, okay, done. I've got this dialed in, no problem. This is how I treat mites. Well, the mite is always evolving. It's always doing something, right? So is the relationship between the parasite and the host. So there's no one thing. This is why we always have to observe as much as possible without harassing the parents, but they're really forgiving. Nice. So I think that Alicia has my email address, and I think it went, I don't know if it did go out, but if people have questions, they can, send me an email.
What's your email?
It's juliesbees@gmail.com.
Okay, I'm gonna write your email here in the chat. Julie's Bees at
Before you call me or before you email me, open your box, right? So you can answer like the string of questions. What's the queen doing? How many frames of brood do you have? What's your nectar source? Like first, do some investigation, right? Don't call me and say, what's the matter? and not have opened the box in 3 months, right? And if you become afraid of your bees, this happens, it's okay. It's okay. Then you just find some way. You either have moral support, you get a better veil, you get longer gloves, whatever it is, right? But the bees never want to shame you for your failures or,
Loving them.
right. They're just trying to survive.
So any final questions as we wrap up this session? We have thank you so much.
Thank you
And
guys so much.
also thank you for your holistic and biocentric message. And yeah, this is really great. I really appreciate you talking about the bees in this way.
All you brave people sort of
Yeah.
taking on a whole new hobby.
Yeah, beekeeping.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true.
So I don't see any other questions. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, you're welcome. We're getting some more thank yous here. Great. Well, I think we'll just wrap it up then. And thanks, Julie, for being with us. This
Thank you
is
so much.
really
Thanks for being
wonderful.
like the Zoom guru.
Yeah.
So I see in the pretend audience, so that
Right.
this is my first Zoom thing. So I'm so grateful for you guys for just being here and making it seem so normal.
Yeah, okay.
We're
Great.
normal.
And thanks everyone who tuned in on our Zoom. And also this is recorded, so this will be available on our website next week, on the Learning Council website and the VOGA website. So thanks so much.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. All right, people, we're happy.
Thank you guys. Oh, that's such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.